Good afternoon. Welcome to CrossFit Strength and Depth 2020. Wow, it's been a whole year. We're here. We're delighted to be back here at Excel for what promises to be 3 days of incredible competition. I'm Barry Ahern. This is my co-commentator, Ben Massey. Ben, you've competed at the Games. You know what this is like, what the qualification process feels like. How are you feeling about this weekend?
I've got the same butterfly feeling as I do before any competition. It's going to be an amazing 3 days. We've got more days in than last year, and I'm just really excited to see the calibre of athlete that are going to compete throughout this entire weekend.
There's some really exciting new additions to this year as well. Obviously, the fact we're 3 days, we're moving into a sellout arena. Like, massive credit to the guys behind Strength and Depth, Ollie and Megan Mansbridge. What an effort. They had to get more seats in. The demand was so large for this event. That's huge.
Yeah, and I think also, you know, we've got these top tier athletes, but we've also got this affiliate cup now, and it's going to open up the pool and bring a whole host of spectators coming to admire and cheer on their athletes.
It's so exciting, and we can't wait to take you through it over the next couple of days. We're going to be here all weekend. We might have the odd break, but we're going to be here. Ben and I will be taking you through it. There's going to be some guest commentators in here with us as well. We're excited to see who those guys are. We're going to keep that as a surprise for everybody on the feed. But we're so happy to be here. And to first workout, we're going to be sending people outside in the pretty cold conditions today, and they're going to be doing a 6K run. Thoughts on that first workout to set up this competition?
Yeah, I think it's a nice way to get us moving, and it's a really good test. We don't ever see anything really long, so I think that's great programming by Ollie.
I think it's really exciting, and actually we're going to say hello to our presenter, Lauren, who's down on the dockside right now, actually, as we prepare for this opening workout. Lauren, good afternoon.
Afternoon, Barry. Yeah, I am trackside. As you can see, you've got the finish/start line behind me, and we've just seen all the masters go through. So it's a little bit drizzly, and we know there's limited wind, and they all found the run fairly simple but very, very blowy. I've taken a little look at the athletes, and I think this is something that Gabriella Magala could do really well at. She didn't quite get the opportunity to showcase her skills at the CrossFit Games in this area, but trust me when I say that girl's fire. And then Matthew Fraser, I know everyone thinks he's going to win probably just about every event. And he's well known for making his weaknesses strengths. And we've seen that over past CrossFit Games, that running now is most definitely in his wheelhouse. So can't wait to see what our 4-time CrossFit Games champion can do out on the floor today. But Barry and Ben, back to you guys.
Thanks, Lauren. Obviously, she's down there with she's mentioned a couple of those athletes there. We have got Matt Fraser, world champion, 4 times CrossFit Games world champion. He's here, major hit for this event to have an athlete of that caliber competing. Lauren mentioned there's maybe a sense that he's going to dominate everything, but there's plenty of room for surprises this weekend.
Absolutely. I think the workouts that we've got are a real true test, and all the different athletes we've got are going to shine in different elements. And that's the great thing about our sport, is you may think someone is going to win one thing, and then out of nowhere you get someone else in the mix, and they really start to kind of mess the field up.
Absolutely. And look, we've got an event that never been seen at a CrossFit competition before. We've got rowing. We've got the regatta tomorrow. Now, we'll talk about that in more detail when it comes to it tomorrow. But there's a lot of tests going on for these athletes this weekend.
Yeah, and they're really going to feel, as we move through the 3 days, it's really going to get them working hard. I think, you know, there's such a great pool there. We've got our women and real high standard of athlete there.
Well, let's have a chat about some of these female athletes that are here. Like Lauren's already mentioned Gabriella Magala. She is a stunningly good athlete, but there's a lot of great names in this list, like Alison Scudds. We've got Kelsey Keel. So there's a lot of Americans who have come over as well for this event. They see that this is a major opportunity. We welcome Laura Horvath back as well. Huge athlete with a lot of potential, who many people have said over the last few years is a potential Games champion in the future. Thoughts on some of those athletes coming through?
I think the fact that they're here and they want to use this competition as a test is a true testament to what Ollie has created. The other thing is some of them have already got their spot to the games. So those athletes, of course they want to perform well, but the ones that we really want to focus on are those ones that haven't quite got their ticket and they're desperate to get to the games.
How do you think those athletes are feeling as we come in? We're just a few minutes away from the opening workout of the event this year. In terms of that anticipation of reaching the games or being that close to the games, how does that feel for an athlete? You've been to regionals as a solo athlete before, as an individual. What was it like for you when you were over there?
I think everything that you work for is building up to this time. So it's kind of a weird mix of emotions. You know, it's exciting and you're really thrilled about what's about to happen, but equally you're really nervous because you don't want to see that reflection and know where you are.
Well, talking about you as a male athlete at regionals before, we'll have a look through some of the male athletes competing here this weekend. Again, we've mentioned Matt Fraser, huge name. We'll talk a lot about him over the weekend. But we've got Bronislav Alenkovic, winner of last year's event, the first ever CrossFit Sanctional here in London. Thoughts on how he'll be feeling coming into almost defending his title and the competition that he's facing this weekend?
I think it's a great place to be, you know. It fires you up, it gets you excited, and, you know, it makes you want to work that little bit harder to kind of defend your honour. So I think he's going to have a great weekend. The other person to really look at is David Chirunki. You know, he was third last year, and he's right in the mix there. So close to being qualifying for the games. So I think
I ran into David at the end of last year's competition, and the real sense of devastation, you could see it in his face. He just looked gutted because he knew how close he was, and that's something that he'll be trying incredibly hard to get that qualifying spot this weekend.
Yeah, he will, and I think, you know, it's going to be really good to watch. Really exciting to watch.
So actually, with Lauren's back down on the dockside, and we've got a very special guest to open up proceedings today. Lauren, it's over to you.
Yeah, a very special guest indeed. Well, CrossFit subject matter expert in aerobic capacity, Chris Hinshaw. Chris, if there's any event to speak to you about, it's probably going to be this one, isn't it? What did you make of the format of the 3,000 meter loops?
I am so excited about this event. I mean, the thing is in the world of running, 3,000 meters is the entry point where we call that a distance event. And so a lot of times what we see in the CrossFit space is miles, maybe even 2 miles. That's not even considered distance. I mean, what we're talking about here is 6,000 meters. It's really going to show the people that have done their homework. You can't fake a 6,000 meter run. If you haven't been training your running, it's going to be exposed today.
Talking about doing homework, you've got athletes out there today, and Haley Adams. What were you telling her before she sets out on this one?
So Haley, one of the things that we know is that once you know what the event is, and we knew it was 6,000 meters, Haley should be able to hold somewhere between a 6:30 mile pace and a 6:40 mile pace for the whole thing. She has locked in that tempo before this, and so her body is going to be comfortable with that speed. I expect Haley to do really well. Same thing, Fraser. Fraser, you know what? He's got a 5:05 mile. He's fast. The thing is that Fraser should be holding somewhere between 5:50 and 6 minutes per mile. He's also done the same homework and locked it in. I would expect good things from them today.
So if you were predicting like a top 3 finish on male and female, where would your money be lying?
I mean, I would expect those two to be in the top 3. The thing is that we also have, you know, people that are specialists in the endurance world. And if you are a specialist in longer time domains, especially in the movement of running, you're going to want to establish your dominance now. You're going to want to show the powerhouses, the Frasers, you know, the Laura Horvaths, that, you know what, I'm here to play and I'm dominating now. And that game of intimidation, it's incredibly important for those athletes.
Thanks very much, Chris. The race is actually about to start, so we'll let you get off to enjoy. But yeah, we'll see what these guys have got.
Fantastic to see Chris Hinshaw here, Ben. He's a bit of a guru in his field, and obviously he's working with CrossFit Mayhem down in Tennessee. And you've got Rich Froning and the team coming over this weekend, we haven't really touched on teams, but we will as we get into it. But it's really exciting to have somebody like Froning and his crew competing this weekend.
And this is obviously the first place that they can qualify for the games, as we don't do it through the Open anymore. So they'll have picked this event based off the fact that it was such a good event last year.
Awesome. Well, look, we're in. CrossFit Strength in Depth is up and running. We are delighted to be here, and the first runners have gone off in wave 1. We've got, I think we've got 6 athletes who have gone off in this wave. And it's exciting to see these guys setting up, and we sort of heard from Chris Hinshaw there talking about pacing and that mile rate that some of these athletes will be looking for. Your thoughts on how you pick, when you've had to face up to a running workout, how you mentally prepare yourself for that?
When you're running and it's regularly in your program, like Chris said, you get really good at knowing your pace. So it slightly is a race against your peers, but it's also just being aware of what you are capable of. And I'm sure hopefully we'll get some exciting foot races near the end as people sprint to the finish line. It's great to see we've got men and women in the same wave. So we might get a repeat of Tia versus Matt McLeod as we did in the games, which is always quite fun to watch, the guys getting smashed by the girls.
And that's a very important, you raise a very important point there. The fact is that as the men and women are mixed into this, these waves are going off in 45-second increments. The idea is to get all the elite male and female athletes out during this phase. So 45 seconds, we'll have a batch going out every 45 seconds. Also, just to clarify what this challenge is in terms of the event itself, the guys are doing a 2 laps of 3K. Now they're running alongside the Docklands. They've got the shadow of Accelerina. Well, the conditions, it's obviously cold out there. You can see the guys are wearing their headscarves, a lot of them wearing beanie hats, a lot of them wearing tracksuits, leggings and so on. They've had to prepare for colder conditions potentially than they might be used to. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, you know, we're quite lucky. If we're a British athlete, we're used to this misery.
We definitely are.
But yeah, I think, you know, being aware of the conditions, making sure that you are dressed appropriately is a big deal. You don't want to be too cold, you don't want to be too hot. Quite often having layers that you can strip off if you need to mid-run is a good idea. But it's also about getting prepped before you take to the floor. So they'll have had a really good warm-up. I'd want to be really sweaty before I step and hit my run.
And on that, warm-up wise, as we go through the third phase, the third start, your prep for this, there's Laura Horvath wearing number 39 there. We'll look out for her through this heat. You can see Zach George there, the qualifier for the UK going into the games. He's already there. He's got his invitation. He's looking at this as another way of preparation. Dave Sharonki, we mentioned him earlier. There's some big names in this competition this weekend, all gunning for the title, but ultimately getting themselves to Madison.
Yeah, and I think that's the most exciting thing for these athletes, and the biggest deal. Yeah, we've got these top names, but we want to watch the people that are going to qualify for the games. We've got David Sharonki in the yellow shoes, got Matt Fraser in the middle, black beanie, and then we've also got leading the field, who just left shot in the red cap. We've got Lucas Hogberg, who's an incredible runner, and I think he hasn't got his spot either. So I think it's on the men's side, I could say it's perhaps between Bronislav, Lucas Hogberg and David Sharonki.
Well, that's your early prediction for the top 3 in the fight. And as we're talking about that, and we've got the women have gone out, the elite females are competing in this same heat. Thoughts on the top 3 then from the women's point of view? Who do you see as being those, that let's say the podium for this weekend? We'll make your predictions now and we'll see how close you are when it comes to Sunday night.
Okay, podium, I think we've got Hayley Adams, phenomenal athlete. You know, she's won the team competition once before. She came second 2 years in a row. And then her rookie year, she came 6th, which is unbelievable. And I think she's 20. So I think she's definitely got to be up there. We've got Gabriella Megala, who's also a rocket on the run, mixing it up really nicely with these events. She's an incredibly powerful, strong athlete, so I think she's got to be up there. And then, do you know
what about homegrown talent? Who do you see?
That's what I'm going to say. I'm going to shout out to Taylor Howe. If she can get through this run, these other workouts are right in her wheelhouse.
That's a key thing we were discussing before we came on air around how this run could be a separator before we've even really started the competition. Who do you think would be worried about this first event?
I think, you know, I don't know whether anyone's going to be especially worried about it. You know, I think if you haven't done much running in your training, you're going to suffer no matter what. Nothing can prepare you for running other than running. But I think the people who are going to really worry about losing points are those ones that are kind of on the bubble, you know. I don't want to give up points to someone further down the field when they might blow past me on the run, and then in the later workouts they're going to drop down.
We looked at Bronislav last year. We saw him, those final events, he got 2 wins to take the title, to come away with the win. So it's very possible that if you have very strong events, you can really pull yourself up the chart. Does it work the other way, that a disastrous event will pull you all the way down? Can it have that level of impact? It obviously creates a challenge for you to try and counter it. So what I'm trying to say is, maybe would you want your worst event and your worst performing event right at the start, then you know what you're doing, rather than in the middle or at the end of the competition? Is there a psychology that kicked in for these athletes? Yeah,
definitely. I mean, here we've got Josh Al-Shama, regular on the circuit. He's done several sanctionals already this year. I would say for him, he's probably thinking running's not the best. I saw he's coached by Stephen Fawcett, and the other day he was moaning that Stephen had made him go running in the cold.
All about preparation for today, right?
Exactly. So I think, you know, yes, definitely, if this isn't your strong event, you want to get it out the way, and then you can get on with the rest of your weekend.
Josh is looking pretty comfortable there. He's looking pretty happy. But I think obviously we can see there's a great crowd outside actually for this first event, and just reiterates how many fans are going to be here this weekend. We mentioned earlier in the opener that this event is sold out. To have this number of people come and support a CrossFit event here in London is just huge for the sport in this country, and there's a lot for these fans to look forward to every day, each day of this competition, isn't there? Yeah,
7,000 people. The atmosphere alone is going to be something to chase after.
Yeah.
But we've got the rowing. There's Tia on the right hand of our screen.
Claire Toomey is here in support mode this weekend. She's here to support her colleagues and her training partners over the next 3 days. How do you think this might be a little pre-intro for Tia to come over next year?
You never know, she might be sussing the scene and checking out what it's like.
She might be thinking there's a run this year, there won't be one next year, but actually she'd smash the run if she was out there, wouldn't she?
Run. Yeah, she loves the run. As she actually won the run, the swim paddle event at the Games against Matt McLeod. So it would be really good to have her on this running event and see how she pitched up against the men as well.
So we're looking at these conditions, the grey, dull conditions outside. Obviously it's the late January sort of weather that's been kicking in. It's been a cold week in London this week with frost, some below zero temperatures. This is going to challenge the hearts a little bit here as well, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think that comes back to being prepped for your event. If they haven't done a good warm-up, the cold is going to really shock them, and probably their heart rate is going to elevate very, very quickly. So I'd have been looking to spend a good 10-15 minutes on the bike. It's my first event of the weekend.
That was going to be my next question for you, is in terms of preparation before you get outside for this event, warm-up wise, how important is it to just get your body up to temperature to really attack this course?
Incredibly important. Incredibly important. So we've got the first group of athletes going round. They were, I think, in the first wave. So we haven't had the second wave catch up to them, but still being led by Josh. And he is coming up to finishing his first lap. So it's 2 3K loops. Got our Icelandic athlete in the blue, making their way through there.
Haralda Holgersson.
And it's quite. I don't know whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, seeing the athletes running towards you when they've already done the work and you know what you've got ahead.
So for those people that don't know, this venue is also the home of the London Triathlon, one of the world's biggest triathlons, and this course that these athletes are running today is actually a big chunk of the course that's used for that London Triathlon, and you see athletes, as you say, coming around facing back up, and you think, oh no, I've still got that to go. Psychologically, how much does that play into people's mindsets and thinking, I know I've got that athlete's the guy I'm going after? How can that negatively impact or positively impact, or is it a bit of a mix of both?
I think it is a complete mix of both. Sometimes you're going to see them as a rabbit and chase them down. Other times you're going to think, oh no, I'm way behind. But I think mixing it up with the male and female athletes, the guys want to make sure that they get away from them, and the girls are saying, no, we're not having
we're
that.
going off that.
Yeah, we're going to chase them down. So that's Taylor there in the white and grey. Came third in the Open this year in the UK, so really looking for big things from her this
And it's
weekend.
interesting, we're talking about obviously athletes turning around and facing back on each other. There was almost a moment where a couple of athletes came close there. Is that something these athletes really worry about? I presume it's nothing in terms of any animosity, it's just that they're in that natural running mode and that's what they're doing.
Yeah, I think it's just a case of head down. We've got to get the work done. We want to, it's a low skill event. It's really testing our capacity. We want to move through it nicely, but we've also got our eye on perhaps the more challenging workouts later in the day. There's Lucas Hogberg making his way around the hairpin. So it's looking like he's a good 10 to 15 seconds ahead of his closest, Andre Houdet. And it looks like they're making their way through the field. So it looks like Lucas, although was the last wave, has already caught up with the wave ahead. There's Matt Fraser
on his turn.
In his heat. Or in his wave, sorry. We've got Maddie Harris there in the grey leggings.
Obviously, folks, we'll do our best to keep an eye and tell you who's leading what and ultimately who's coming through at the fastest time. We may have to wait until the end of the heats, because obviously we'll see people catching up from wave to wave to wave. But we will keep an eye on all of these times and relay the final results to you as we get them. We'll obviously be here, just to reiterate, we'll be here all weekend to take you through all of the fantastic action taking place. I think, Ben, as we start here on the Friday lunchtime, this is the first outdoor bit of the weekend. We're coming back into the arena this afternoon. We've seen that arena being built overnight. We've seen it come together. It's a magnificent setup and a real, true kind of gladiatorial arena, isn't it, from what you've seen of that?
Yeah, it's an absolutely incredible venue. The setup, I mean, they've had Arctic after Arctic after Arctic lorry, and they just look like kids' toys. You guys will see it later. But tonight's atmosphere, I think, is going to be one of the ones of the weekend. Friday Night Lights in this arena is going to be absolutely pumping. So it's going to be amazing to watch them hit the standard, which is a repeat of a CrossFit Games workout.
Absolutely, I think that's a great leveler as well. It's a good sort of a point for us to measure our athletes coming into this weekend and how they may perform going into the rest of the competition.
Yeah, absolutely. We love comparing athletes. We love saying, oh, they did this time, we did this time. Even when we're working out in our affiliate or in our box, we like to compare ourselves on previous scores, don't we? So there's Matt Fraser, looking like he's finished his first loop and he's gone out for his second.
Looking pretty strong, so he's coming through. He went off in the second wave of that group, so he's coming through there in just under 13 minutes on unofficial timing. There's Bron. Now Bron is just coming around to about 2.5K. He's taking things relatively easy, would you say, looking at him there?
I think we kind of expected this from Bron. He's wasn't a biggest fan of the run last year. There was a run deadlift event where he kind of walked on the assault runner. And there's Hayley Adams, looking very, very strong indeed. Hinshaw mentioning, look at her gait, really nice heel pick as she's cruising along there.
Is that actually talking about that technique and what Chris Hinshaw was talking about there? Is that something that you believe can be coached to improve stride and foot pattern and so on? Or is it natural ability for that?
Of course it can be coached. I think because we are jack of all trades, masters of none athletes, we also need to consider where we put a lot of our effort. With the barbell, we know that it's going to come up. We know it's going to be included. And the transfer from working with a barbell into other weightlifting events or disciplines with sandbags is of great crossover. However, running is very good cardiovascularly, but the transfer over isn't necessarily the best.
It was great to see that we welcomed a new athlete onto the course there in the form of a black lab. Obviously, the beauty of this event is it's open to the public, so anybody coming down, walking their dogs. The course is essentially available for people to support and to run themselves. So it's good to see so many, such a wide variety of fans coming through so early in the competition. Now we're looking at these guys. It looks, for some of these athletes, they don't look that comfortable on this run. Is it fair to say there's some wishing this away?
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. I think, running is one of those things, you always see the running sucks t-shirts and the moans and groans whenever it's programmed in the class. But I think, it is a great test. If you want to be in contention to be the fittest in the world, you have to be able to run. And I think throwing the athletes in right at the beginning of the weekend and saying, get your chops around that, is a really nice way to start the competition.
If you were competing as an athlete into this event this weekend and you saw the run as your opener, how do you think, without swearing on air, what do you think your reaction would have been to this? Would you think, bring it on?
Yeah,
actually,
I'd be really
I'm good
chuffed
with that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you know, but we run 2 of the running events at the CrossFit Games in 2017. So running.
Yeah, big shout out to that. We should give you credit for that.
Running is definitely in my wheelhouse. I like it a lot. I think it's a really good challenge, and a great way to set us all off.
So actually, these are our lead athletes. These are the guys who are setting the pace. They were off in that first wave. They seem to be making a good impression in terms of extending that and sort of stretching out that 45-second gap. So it'll be interesting to see what these guys come through in terms of their finishing time. Obviously, there's a 40-minute time cap you can see on the graphic there. Just a reminder, this is 6K run, 2 laps of the 3K loop, and a 40-minute time cap. So I don't think there'll be any athletes getting close to that time cap. It doesn't feel like it feels like a generous time cap for people to work under.
I think it's definitely a generous time cap. I agree with you. I would be surprised if anyone did get capped. But you never know. We could have a Jen Smith scenario where we're having to walk the course due to a mishap. But I think, we should have everyone in, and it's, I think the point of this time cap is to make sure everyone completes the entirety. If it was a really tight time cap, some athletes may only end up running 4.5K.
Yeah, so that's very interesting to say that they could actually just use it as an energy conservation sort of tactic, and I think that's a very, very good point. That it's a finish. It's a as we say, generous time cap, allows everybody to complete it and to, in theory, exert the same effort that you might do for somebody who's run a bit quicker, but you're maybe not as fit in, or maybe not, running isn't a skill in that respect.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, we should always get the athletes to complete all the work. Otherwise, it is unfair on those who've done more. Although the chances are they're probably a fitter athlete who can handle that.
Yeah, of course. And in terms of the athletes coming into today, obviously this is, we're still fairly early in the Sanctionals year, so to speak, and there's obviously a few that have been before, and there'll be many more to come after the event here in London. Is there a Sanctionals tactic for many of these athletes? Is it to try and get into as many as possible? Are some said, right, I'll be selective, I'm going to make that my goal, and then if I don't make that, that's my backup, and if that doesn't happen, that's my backup again? What's the psychology for these athletes as they look into these sanctional events after the Open has obviously taken place? Again, structure has changed across the qualification process. What's the psyche for these athletes as they look at the sanctional season?
I think you're going to have two groups of athletes. You've got the athletes that have performed really well in the Open and have already qualified. They're going to pick the sanctional in the season based on where they are when they're trying to peak. The other athletes who are desperate to qualify for the games, haven't got their spot, they're probably going to pick a bunch and go, if that works, great, I don't do the rest. If not, I'm going to move on to the other ones.
And would that be the approach for an athlete? If they get their spot from a sanctional, would they stop and they'll just then go into preparation mode then for the games?
Yeah.
Is that how that will work? There isn't the law of the cash, let's say.
Yeah, games training. For the athletes that have been to the games many times before, they're certainly going to want to work out which ones they could potentially earn some more money from. But the ones that have never been, their only goal is to get there. That's all they worry about.
And what will you say to the theory that actually there's no better preparation than competition? Would people look at going to sanctionals as being the best prep for going to the games? Or is it better for an athlete to, say, focus on their weaknesses at home, at their home box, their home affiliate, and say, right, this is me, this is my plan, and this is what I'm going to follow for the next 4 months?
Yeah, I think it depends which season you're, which point in the season you are.
Of course.
If you're aiming to peak at a certain point, which waves and flows you're going through, whether you're working on your strength, your conditioning, your gymnastics. But definitely competition is the way to get ready for competition.
So we've got two homegrown talents here in terms of Zach George and Dave Sharonki. Now, Zach and Dave, there wasn't much between these guys in the Open.
We've got
Here we go.
finisher.
Here's our first finisher. He is powering through there. What an effort from that. I think that's Daniel Slov from Denmark crossing the line. So he looks like he's certainly put the first marker down. It'll be interesting to see how obviously the sort of graduated starts and the delayed starts for the different waves, how that will materialize with the final times on the scoreboard.
Yeah. I think hopefully we'll get a good idea shortly as they load up the timing chips. But it's definitely a strong finish from that athlete there. He was pulled away from the pack nicely, and you can see now as they're starting to realize they're on the home straight, it's quite a fast turn. Look at Andre Houde's moved up through the pack considerably. He was in the last wave to go, and it looks like he's already caught up with the first or second wave.
It's what I find fascinating is how these athletes are, the different states of in terms of their dress and their sensation and the body movement going through as fatigue starts to kick in. There's a few of them looking a little bit more ragged as they come through this compared to when they maybe sort of started off, that maybe they're feeling the time pressure to really try and get the best score on the board that they can.
Yeah, every point counts in this game, and we've got a tiered scoring system, so you're going to gain a lot more points, and then as it drops down, the points difference will be considerable, to the point where if you're at the bottom of the pack, you may only get 1 or 2 points either way. So it really pays to get as many points as you can.
What about that for a finish? We're gonna be here. That's Logan Ewing there crossing the line. This is Dave Sharonki and Zach George.
And this is a little bit of damage control for David. He's not the strongest of runners, but if he can put in a good shift here, be middle to top of the pack, I think it's going to set him up nicely.
And this
for the
looks
rest
like
of the
our top
weekend.
performing female athlete in this first heat. That's Sarah Adams.
And
And
Hogberg
there's
finishes
time
there.
there for grab his can. So he's definitely working on his sponsorship work there, and he's got his drink as he goes.
Tom Wilson.
We'll be hearing from Lauren, I think, shortly with one of our winners. But
And there's Andre Houdet.
so there's some big finishes coming through here. You can see that the lure of the finish line is pulling out the extra bit of pace. Do you think, when people see that finish line, they can run that little bit faster? Why do you not think they can run that much faster from 100, 200, 300 meters further out? What's the psychology in there? Because I do. When I run my marathons, it's like the last mile, I know I'm nearly there. Is it the fact that the psychology is saying the finish line is there, I can see it, let's run a bit quicker? Is it because maybe from further away you can't and you don't necessarily have that sort of positive mindset that kicks in?
I think there is a little bit of that. I also think that when you are full tilt, shall we say, you've only got a certain amount of reserve to get that last sprint in.
Yeah.
And it's probably going to be, anywhere between 30 seconds to a minute. So if you go too early, you don't want to end up walking over the line.
You definitely don't want to be walking across the line. We've seen a few athletes. Here comes Zach George, Dave Shrunky, both just crossed the line as well. So good effort from those boys. It'll be interesting to see the fallout from this first event and to see what work these boys have got, and boys and girls have got to do as they bring themselves back into the latter part of the competition. Here's Laura Horvath as she's making her final turn for the finish line. So it's about 400 meters from there to the finish line. So it's still a horrible little distance to finish things off as you make that final turn.
Yeah, 400 meters, if you've ever done that at full speed, it's really, really hard. And we've got a bit of a foot race to the finish there. Hayley Adams, nice finish, looking solid. And
Looking
bend
solid,
over,
looks in a bit of
catch your
pain.
breath.
Yeah, I think that shows the effort that's gone into this opening workout. You can see there's a lot of guys who are taking deep breaths, taking some big air in, and it's going to be it's exciting to see these athletes putting such an effort in so early as they make their push for claiming the sanctional title.
Yeah, they definitely want to work hard and move through.
How often do you work out with music? It's interesting there to see number 63 with headphones plugged in. What do you think she'll be listening to, music or motivational chat from her coach?
I definitely think it would be music. I much prefer listening what's going on around me. Interesting pod there. Slightly larger, more powerful athletes seem to have huddled together and they're perhaps pulling each other along. Again, size does matter when you're running. The bigger you are, the more weight you've got to carry. There's Gabriella there finishing, closely followed by Maddie, British athlete.
We were talking about the London Triathlon earlier in this course, and in that sport of triathlon and cycling, there's drafting, right? You've got cyclists who will rotate, taking the sort of the upwind, and they're sort of taking the brunt of that, and then there'll be athletes that sit behind that to maybe make their running life, their cycling life a little bit easier, and then they'll rotate and take it back to the front to take the effort and share the load. Do you think that group of athletes you were just talking about would be working in a similar way, or is that just the fact that these athletes are just so naturally pacing at the same time?
Yeah, I think it's probably going to be more of a case of naturally that's the pace that they've settled into. It may be that you kind of pick a shoulder to hang off of, and when more pods kind of group together, you just naturally end up staying there. Interesting to see Steffi Chung at the back of the pack there.
Yeah, do we think there's we don't want to speculate on any injury, but maybe this is just the way that she's had to pace this? Do you think maybe she's, in terms of arriving into London, it's coming from the States, do you think maybe there could be a jet lag factor kicking in for this first event, and maybe the arrival time in the week might be a factor in how that plays out?
I think it's certainly something to consider, but I imagine she's probably had that under control, under wraps. She's got a very good coach, Yami Tikkanen. And there's Taylor crossing the line.
So that's Taylor, who's a prediction from you for the homegrown maybe podium place. She looks like she didn't necessarily enjoy that, as many athletes possibly didn't. Now, actually talking about footwear in this competition, already you can see there's a combination of athletes who are wearing running shoes and then others who are maybe what we might consider typical CrossFit shoes, which are multi-purpose, multifunctional. If you know you've got a running event, would you run in runners, or would you
Absolutely.
sort of run in what you're more comfortable with? Because it's interesting to see that there might be some of these shoes that look pretty new, and with running shoes you've got to bed yourself in, don't you? And maybe there's more athletes who feel more comfortable running in their day-to-day training shoes.
Yeah, I think there is a bit of that. But I would say if you want to be performing at the top level, you're going to have runners regardless. So I think it's probably not so much a comfort thing, it just might be that they haven't managed to get their runners.
There's Kelsey Kyle coming in there to cross the line, and here's Bron, last year's winner, and we were talking about
way
that.
at the back. Way at the back of the. I'm really surprised to see Bron there. It's interesting because he is an incredible athlete, and I'm surprised he hasn't worked. Perhaps you could see him muttering to himself, "Why am I here?"
Yeah, he's not enjoying this, is he? He's sort of he's thinking, I've come all the way back to London to defend my title, and they give me a run to start off my defence. It's like, I don't want to be here right now. But maybe again, we've been speaking about Steffi Chung crossing the line. Bron might be looking at this, all right, just going to get this out the way. I'm just going to get it done. I'll take my medicine and I'll get myself ready for later in the competition.
Yeah, I think the only problem with that tactic is the field is pretty deep, and you can't afford to drop points.
Yeah.
So you want to limit as many people coming in between you and your competition. Now, on the flip side, that bodes very well for David.
I was going to say, David has actually performed, from what we were talking about before, looked like David's performed exceptionally well in that opening event, considering maybe he's one of the biggest guys here in the competition. Like, the guy's coming in at a height of nearly 6'2". That is tall for a CrossFit athlete. He's in that state where he might be more predisposed from a rowing point of view. We'll talk about that tomorrow. He might have a more natural figure for running. So he's probably coming through thinking, actually, you know what, I've made a good start here. I can feel pretty happy about where I'm at right now.
Yeah, definitely. And that's a great way to start the weekend, with a strong finish, especially if it isn't your biggest strength.
But we're nearly there. We've nearly seen all the athletes cross over the line. We've just got to keep an eye on the last few athletes to get through. All of them are coming well under the time cap. We discussed that 40-minute time cap was generous, and it allows all of these athletes to finish, put the effort in, exert that effort, and set everybody up for this afternoon and Friday Night Lights, as we mentioned. We'll be back inside from just after 4 o'clock, and we'll be obviously covering live from inside there, and we can't wait to be inside the arena, getting the buzz of the crowd coming through on Friday. Now, rest period, crucial rest, as these guys recover after this first effort. What's the first thing these guys will do after this run? Will they just stretch off? Will they start to roll? Will they do a bit of everything as they kind of wind down, get themselves prepped then for the next workout?
Yeah, well, we always say the workouts are important, but you need to be a master of recovery. So these athletes, they're going to be straight inside, probably going to spin their legs out on the bike, few minutes on the rower on the bike, and then perhaps change clothes. You don't want to be wearing wet clothes and get cold, and then they'll get their fluids and a bit of food in. And it looks like Bron,
And here's Bron, here he is.
Going to be the last to finish this event. Great of the
He's very generous in his appreciation for the crowd there, and obviously he recognises that possibly wasn't going to be his strongest event today. So I think he's probably accepted that, as we discussed. He's going to be. He now knows where he's got to get himself back up to that lead at the top of that leaderboard. Because unfortunately for him in the men's competition, he is at the bottom right now, and it could be the ultimate comeback.
The only way is up, right?
That's true. That's true. You mentioned earlier, pre coming on air, about Matt Fraser and obviously his troubles with the running competitions previously and running events previously. What does that do for the mental preparation and the mental reaction to a disappointment factor like that?
Yeah, it's
Maybe just give a summary of what happened as well.
Yeah, so at the games, the last run that Matt Fraser did, he dropped a bag out of his bag and was docked a load of points. And I think that's a massive learning curve whenever you are competing. Whenever you're competing and learning and moving through these mistakes, it's only something that you can then transfer over to your next competition.
So look, we're coming through these final stages. All the athletes have crossed the line. I think Lauren's actually down with our first athlete. Is that correct, Lauren? You've got our first athlete who crossed the line down there.
I do, Romain Fellenot, but there is a slight French issue in that I don't speak it at all. So I also have Thomas, who's going to help us translate. So, Romain, how much did you train for this event?
À quel point t'es-tu entraîné du coup pour cet event spécifiquement?
Je me suis pas entraîné spécialement. Mon métier fait que je cours très très souvent, vu que je suis pompier de Paris. Donc la course c'est mon point fort et il fallait que je fasse le maximum sur cette course.
So there was no specific training, but he's a firefighter in Paris, so he's running a lot of j'ai perdu la fin de ta phrase. Oh, and yeah, so this was the event he wanted to earn points, so he gave it everything.
He really did, because in the process, unofficially, he beat Matt Fraser, Lucas Hoburg, a huge roster of games athletes. I mean, that clearly makes you very happy.
Yeah, et donc du coup, effectivement, non officiellement, tu es devant Lucas Hoburg avec 9 secondes d'avance. Comment tu te sens par rapport à ça?
C'est vraiment... je m'y attendais pas, quoi. C'est vraiment un truc énorme. Venir à Londres ici pour un sanctionnal le début de l'année, le début de cette année 2020 pour moi. Donc c'est assez réjouissant et ça motive pour la saison 2020.
Yeah, so he's really surprised. He did not expect it, and it's a really good sign for the beginning of this season.
How important is it to kick off this competition with a win like that?
À quel point c'est important de démarrer une compétition avec une win comme celle-là, avec un event gagné?
Bah, niveau moral, ça donne la patate. Sous la fraîcheur de Londres en plus. Commencer avec peut-être une première place, on attend les résultats officiels, ça donne le sourire.
So he's waiting for the official score, but it's really psychologically and morally a big boost. So it's a good sign for the rest of the event.
It very much is. Congratulations, Romain. Thank you very much, Thomas.
You're welcome.
Ben and Barry, back to you guys.
Thanks, Lauren. It was great to see Romain there. It was fantastic to do our first ever interview in French. There was a nice little step there. But Romain, just talking there through his translator, was talking about how important and how he identified this as being his chance to make an impact. And as Lauren rightly said there, to beat the likes of Matt Fraser and to get that on that little chalkboard of yourselves, to sort of, that's my notch. I've beaten one of the greats. In a CrossFit competition, that must be deeply satisfying.
Yeah, and what a great way to start the weekend. It's going to give him a massive boost going into the next event. But bear in mind, we do need to see officially.
I was going to say, unofficially, Romain has got the win there. So that's a very, very good point of clarification there. We just should ensure people know that we are waiting for that final score. But Romain looked delighted. He looked very, very happy with his effort there. And it was interesting. We were talking about Bron, and that's the top to bottom. We saw Bron cross the line there. But Romain looked very happy. Didn't look out of breath there at the end. He maybe had a few minutes to recover, but he'll be chuffed with how his weekend has started.
Yeah, great start to the weekend. And actually just a nod to his competition prep. He was straight into a warm jacket. his interpreter there, maybe as a coach as well, wrapped him up straight away, and that's really, really nice to see, taking that professionalism of our sport up a level.
And we mentioned that, didn't we, in terms of how important that is to get the warm down and the prep ready for event 2 and 3 later on, in terms of it's so crucial to get those bits right. It's like Dave Brailsford, the head of British Cycling, obviously now with Team Ineos, he talks about those marginal gains and how important it is to prep every little aspect that you could control, and that is one of those prime examples.
Well, exactly. If you do 100 things 1% better, you've improved by 100%.
It's an awful lot, right? There's lots of improvements. And I think, but if you were to look at maybe some of the other athletes that we saw out there on the course, we were commentating as we were going through that, it'd be interesting to see which athletes, of those, and we'll obviously wait on those official results, but of the athletes that we saw going through there, who do you think will be most satisfied with their effort, considering that they may not have looked at this as being their strongest event?
I think we've got a shout out to David and Taylor.
Yeah.
Both did phenomenally well, I think. Again, I really want to see this leaderboard, so hopefully our scoring team is going to...
We'll get that soon, hopefully.
get us back to it. But I think on the whole group seemed to kind of... It was 2 splits, wasn't it?
Yeah.
There were a big group in, and then there was a kind of gap, and then there was the other group. And I'm wondering whether perhaps we had our sort of all-round athletes coming through first, and then we might have our specialists near the tail end. So although they may not have done super well in this event, there's plenty of events later on in the weekend which they'll all be fighting for points for. And I think, this is a real important thing to do well in this event, but the whole weekend all added together is really what we're taking our scores.
Of course, we're going to find the best athlete, the best overall athlete based on these workouts across this weekend. Now, we did mention in commentary around, would you prefer your worst event to be the first and then your best event to be the last? I would say that's probably the natural way of looking at it, but some of these athletes will be looking at these workouts, they've been able to see them, they've been able to practice these workouts for a few weeks. How do you think an athlete, like you've been there, you've put yourself in that sort of the highest level of competition, when you as a team are looking at the workouts, and obviously you don't know all of them when it comes to the games, but when you look at it as a team, how do you psychologically say, right, that's a strength, that's not a strength, and how do we approach that?
I think we'd often break down an event and we'd sort of look at, okay, here I'm going to be good at this part, but I may struggle at this part. Here, you'll be good at this, and you'll be good at this. And then we kind of build together how we're going to attack each event. And then we might also consider what are the events either side, because depending on what they are will also determine what we may do in an event. So I think you've got to look at the whole competition and really see that as the challenge. And then within it, you've got steps throughout the weekend that are going to help you get to the end of it.
And do you think when you look at the cadence of the events and the timing of those events, do you think there'll be athletes saying, right, I can put... No athlete's never going to put 100% in. They're never going to pull themselves short. But do you think an athlete might say, well, look, I recognise that's not my strongest, but the event after that is. So I will put my effort in, but I might just kind of go for my PB, for my PR. And if I can hit that level, I'll be happy. Then I know I'm going to a strength event next that might suit my skill set.
Yeah, definitely. I think that could well be Bron's approach to this. He probably knew that the run wasn't going to be a strong one for him. He perhaps thought, no matter how hard I go, I'm probably not going to be in the mix.
Yep.
So why don't I make sure I come in under the time cap, and then for the rest of the weekend, I can attack those events.
Awesome. Well, Ben, thanks so much for the first window of commentary here for today. It's like fantastic to see the first event off. We'll be back in about 10 minutes for the team event that's coming up. So they'll be back outside ready to take on that challenge, and we'll look forward to taking you through that. We'll be back in about 10 minutes. We'll see you soon. Good afternoon and welcome back. We're delighted to be joined by the legendary Chris Hinshaw. We heard from Chris just prior to that first workout. Chris, it's great to have you back. You were here in the studio with us last year. We're really happy to see you again. Your thoughts on how athletes performed in that before we run through the results. What was your take on that first event and how the athletes did out there on the dockside?
What I was most impressed by was the maturity of the athletes. I mean, this sport is evolving, and what I saw was athletes not just throttling the start and then blowing up. What they were doing was they were getting into some open space and then finding a stride that they can sustain for the 6K.
And how the 6K, in terms of a distance for the psychology of that, where would that sit in terms of the athletes you work with? How would you approach a 6K as a distance? It's not a 10K, it's not a 1K. It's one of those distances. It's quite awkward. How would your athletes and how would you approach that?
So in the running world, distance doesn't start until really 3,000 meters. And so what these athletes did was a true endurance test. And it really broke away the people that were good in shorter time domains and highlighted strengths and weaknesses with these athletes. I love the fact that they ran them through 3,000 meter intervals. And so you can see the athletes that actually had an ability to find a sustainable intensity that they can maintain until they got close enough to the finish line where they can bring it home. The athletes that couldn't do that, you're seeing dramatic drop-offs on intensity, and that to me shines a big weakness in their arsenal of fitness.
Talking about intensity and your athlete there, Haley, she's had a great run. We're just seeing the results from that first workout, and terrific to see Haley up there in second place, and also a terrific effort, Ben, from Karis Webster taking home that first place.
Incredible work by Karis there. It's quite nice to see a US flag framed by two British flags for once. But no, I think all the ladies worked really hard there, yeah, I think as Chris said, it was really nice to see them really get into the groove and really understand that pacing.
I mean, what's incredible about those speeds, that's a 6:20 mile, and it is a legit 6K. That is solid.
And that's what we heard you talking about. And actually looking at the men's, the Roman Felino, what an effort from here. We heard from him post-event, but that's a terrific effort, terrific time. And thoughts on that, Chris? It's like phenomenal, right?
I can't even wrap my head around it. I mean, the fact is that these are big names that are CrossFitters. These are not runners. They're not specialists in the movement of running. And they're pulling times that are 5:45 pace for 6,000 meters in event one. Are you kidding? It's going to be a good comp.
When we talk about athletes in terms of CrossFit athletes and the running course, we're right onto this course now. Now, we go out towards, essentially, we're heading out down towards the Docklands. It's, as you mentioned, a 3,000 meter loop. Mm-hmm. Now, the conditions are pretty flat. You may have walked the course. Did you get a chance to walk it yourself?
I did, yep.
And there's a little bit exposed out towards that eastern side of the docks. But as we come back up to Excel, there's a little bit more protection from any conditions that might be, any wind that's blowing across. But just thoughts on the conditions out there and that 3K loop and how people might approach the conditions today.
If anybody wants to know what an ideal running condition is, go outside right now in this venue. It is about as good as you can ever possibly imagine. Light drizzle, temperature is perfect, no wind. This is as good as it gets. There are no excuses today.
This is the perfect setup. No excuses. We're going into the first wave for the team event. Now, this is slightly different. Obviously, it's a team. They're working as a team of 4, 2 males, 2 females. And the objective for this, as well as completing the 6K as quickly as possible, between them, they have to carry a 20 kg sandbag. Now, they can hold it as a team, as a pair, or individually. How would you set your guys up approaching this first challenge?
So Ollie, the director of Strength and Depth, has done an incredible job with this event, because what he's doing is requiring the best of the best runners on the team to to actually push their intensity and create a level of fatigue. If I partner up with a slower runner and I'm dragging them with a rope, the fact is that's going to be an easy event for me. That's not fair. He's going to make the fastest of the fast suffer the most, and that is creative. If I was a team player, I mean, I'm looking at Mayhem. You know what? Is Rich Froning actually going to be the second person to carry the bag in the last group? It's hard to say, because there's a lot of tactics involved in that. You're going to need Rich Froning to deliver the goods in the balance of the weekend.
And like for obviously for us here and fans in the UK, it's great to see the likes of Matt Fraser and Rich Froning competing here this weekend. It's how does Rich look at this event as a sanctional? Obviously, it's teams don't qualify through the Open this year, so this is a major event on the circuit for these guys. How did they look at this event and this whole CrossFit Strength in depth? What was their approach coming into this weekend?
So it's a very simple approach. They look at the history of the event and they look at the events that are being programmed. And the thing is that the people like Matt Fraser, Rich Froning, they're looking for true CrossFit style tests. They're not looking for a bunch of funny different things that make their event unique. They want something that's going to prepare them for what's going to come in August. And the fact is that these events have truly been consistent in terms of the way in which they're programmed. That's why these athletes are here. This event is going to continue to dominate and be the leader out there.
We're just looking at this. So obviously these waves are going off in 45-second increments. There's a time cap of 45 minutes on that. It's interesting to see, just as the athletes line up on the start line, how many women are taking the sandbag up front and how many men are taking the sandbag up front. Is there a deliberate thought in terms of who takes that first weight to take a bulk of the effort out of that? How would they divide up the difference? Is it going to be equal split, Ben? Would they look at it and say, right, 6K, 1,500 meters each with a 20 kg sandbag? Is that how they're going to look at it, or are they going to spread the load differently?
Absolutely not. They're going to put their fastest runners probably with the bag. Would you agree, Chris?
Yeah, so the thing is that every team's going to know in this event who is the strongest and who is the weakness. Now, the unique thing about putting a bag on people is that you could take a strong runner who is not physically strong and destroy them. And so part of it is that you've got to look at it, the tactics. The tactics of this will be, you got to make sure that whoever's running in that second 3,000 meters is actually going to be rested. And so these tactics, like if you look at it, I mean, Mayhem, they've got a hierarchy of who's the fastest and who's the slowest, but also who's the strongest and who's the weakest in terms of their power output.
And Chris, do you also think that when you add a load to an athlete, if they're perhaps not the most proficient runner, it highlights their poor mechanics?
Yeah, so the thing that people need to recognize is that if you are running with a weight, like a vest or a sandbag, your whole stride mechanics changes. And so what CrossFit's doing is they're requiring athletes to have a stride without a load and a stride with a load, and they're totally different animals. And so an elite level runner, you will destroy them by putting on a 30-pound vest because they've never actually had those running mechanics. And so if you have athletes that are solid runners, it doesn't mean that they're going to be good in this event because the bag is going to really destroy them.
So a larger athlete could easily do better based on the fact that compared to their body weight, having 20 kilos, or this is 45 pounds, on their body isn't going to be as much as having, say, a 60 kilo or 50 kilo female carrying the sandbag.
That's exactly right. So really what it is it's these power-based athletes. So, you know, back in 2013 when I ran with Jason Khalipa, you know, twice a week, I would destroy him on flat sections of open road. But what was really enlightening for me was that here's a guy that if he got me in the hills and we were running uphill, because of his ability to generate power, he would beat me. And so you take a power-based athlete who is not a very good runner and you give them a sandbag, they're going to be looking really good. And that's why these events are tricky.
how are you going to put your best foot forward if you really haven't practiced this type of a workout?
And also, if someone redlines thinking they can carry the bag for longer than they should do, that's going to affect the whole team, isn't it, as well?
That's the thing about, a 6K. This is what we consider a distance event. Even 3,000 meters is distance. And the truth is that you're going to get to your maximum sustainable intensity, and that's all that you can do. People think, oh, I'm just going to shoot above that maximum sustainable pace. Well, we call that the death zone. You know what? Enter only the death zone when the finish line is in sight. So that's the thing, is that everybody is going to try and be at that maximum sustainable intensity. And that team that can do that is the one that's going to perform the best.
It's interesting to see, as we look down the course from our camera feed there, just actually how bunched up the teams are currently on this heat. And looking out there, there's obviously there's not much to separate them. It'll be interesting to see how much effort they exert here in this first round, this first event. Chris, your thoughts on the impact that this running event can have on the rest of the competition for these athletes?
So I just got done talking with Haley Adams, and one of the things that she said is that, you know what, I didn't even bother sprinting to the finish. It is a long weekend, and if you make a move at the finish where you're sprinting, we all know that a sprint is going to involve your fast twitch fibers. Well, you know what? Why would you intentionally fatigue these fast twitch fibers unnecessarily in a sprint that may not have any impact at all? And so you need those fibers, especially in the weekend as it unfolds. And if there is a high strength movement, you know what? And those fibers are fatigued, they're just not going to be available, and you won't hit the numbers.
And it's interesting to see that that decision, I think, was fully justified with her second place. She sort of put herself into an incredibly strong position, conserved energy, and put herself into a very strong position for attacking tonight and moving into tomorrow and Sunday.
Yep.
But Ben, thoughts on Haley's position? You've called her out as being one of the favourites for that podium position to take the win this weekend. When you look at her and you're hearing Chris talking about the attitude and the approach, it's quite refreshing to hear that that's the psychology approaching this event.
It just shows such a high level of maturity for such a young athlete. I mean, and awareness as well, knowing where her competitors are. I'm sure if there was someone real close to her, she may have stepped on a little bit, but if there's no need, why bother?
Why bother? And that's the thing, is in contrast, you look at what Matt Fraser did. Those results, Matt Fraser sprinted that last 300 meters in.
Because he needed to.
And look what he did. He beat someone by what? 0.05 of a second. I mean, it was incredible. And that's where it is you have to make those judgment calls. And a lot of athletes get caught in the moment. They're like, oh, I'm just going to throttle this thing because this is what we do. When we see the finish line, we drain all of our available energy, and then we lay on the ground afterwards. Haley, she cruised across the finish line. She got second place by 11 seconds. And you know what? She just did an easy jog afterwards. She's fresh. And that, if I was in first place right now, would be threatened.
So speaking about Haley, obviously, as we look at the teams sort of on their transition between sandbags, just going back to Haley and her approach, did you speak to her about setting a time as an objective for this event and to say, right, you're in this window, you've got this room margin for error of 30 seconds. Did you set that as a level for her to approach?
So as soon as the event got announced, now you're not like looking at the unknown and unknowable. You actually have a specific movement running, and then you have a specific distance or time domain. And we know now at 6,000 meters that distance, Haley should be somewhere in that 630-ish intensity for the whole 6,000 meters. So what you do is you go and lock in that muscle memory for that particular movement and that speed. And that's what specific training is. You train for what's about to happen so that the muscles are not surprised. It's always fascinating for me that when you're given the answers to the test, people practice something that's not on the test. lock in that muscle memory, and that's what Haley was doing. Is as soon as it was announced, I'm going to do nothing but practice the speed that my body should experience, so that as soon as the gun goes off, my body's recognizing it and I lock it in.
So Haley was running at her 6K pace regardless of what session she was doing.
Right, and so that was the thing. Same thing with Frazier. You know, Frazier, I felt that he would do a 6-minute mile pace for 6K. I mean, I think he went 5:58 in there. I mean, because of that sprint at the end, he probably wanted to make me look bad. But I mean, the fact is that as soon as you find out what the event is, then what we want to do is prepare the body so it's not surprised. And if you go out there and do like a low intensity, easy jog, then the gun goes off, and what's your body want to do? It wants to do a low intensity, easy jog. And so we must recognize the importance of specific training when the events get announced.
So Haley, has she tried any of the other workouts?
You always try the workouts. And so the beauty of Haley and what she's lucky, I mean, she's in a town with Tia Toomey, Matt Frazier, and she trains every day with the Mayhem Freedom team. And you know what? If there's a person that's the brightest in the sport, I mean, it's Rich Froning. I mean, he is an expert at these types of events. And that's, of course, why he's here.
Expert tactician, right?
Right. I mean, that's you know, the thing is people always want to know, it's like, how would you pace an event that you've never done before, right? No one's done this event, so how do you come up with the tactics? Well, that comes through experience.
Yeah.
And we're just looking here at it. It was one of the thoughts we were talking about, the impact of carrying extra weight and how that creates a slightly different run in sort of technically. Interesting to see. There's a couple of athletes who are holding the sandbag over one shoulder, and that naturally changes the alignment of the spine.
Yep.
Thoughts on that in terms of the impact of holding it over the shoulders and not being able to move your arms to run, and then the flip side of that, over one shoulder you can move another arm to maybe generate additional energy. Just your thoughts on the impact in that respect.
So that is a tactical decision. When you put that sandbag on one side or the other, you're really actually putting it on the dominant side of your body. So for example, my dominant leg is my right leg. I'm stronger with my right leg, and so you know what? I can relieve my weak side by putting the bag on my right side. And that is actually, for the people that are doing it, an advanced tactical advantage. It's smart. The other thing that I notice is that, you know, these athletes, they're actually pulling the bag down on their shoulders. That bouncing effect actually creates a higher load at impact. And so you see people that are much more sophisticated, but it's because they've practiced.
Yeah. That's the benefit of knowing the workout in advance, right, Ben, in terms of having those tactical changeovers. You look at how some of these athletes, you've got an athlete coming up behind, they just slide it onto the neck and away they go. It's interesting to see. That's obviously an opportunity for practice to get those transitions technically spot on so that they know when they approach. We're seeing the guys with CrossFit Mayhem Freedom, they are a unit. They are doing every step. They are together, whereas there's other teams that are a little bit more broken out. But it seems that Rich and his approach and the team approach is everything one unit. Is that fair to say? Because
Mayhem is recognizing if you're together as a group, you can get a pulse on how your teammates are doing. And the thing is that that team is smart. They judge intensity based upon the rate in which their teammates are breathing. We all know that our aerobic system, that energy system, is based upon oxygen. When our demand for oxygen exceeds what we can actually bring in, we start to hyperventilate. That breathing cadence is the tell. And if you hear your partner hyperventilating, they're not faking it, they're hurting. And so that's the cue, without saying anything, let me have the bag.
Yeah, and that relationship with them, because they are together every day, they're going to be so much more aware of it, aren't they? I think the other thing that has been really interesting to watch is how some athletes with the bag are leading, and then the others are behind them, so they don't ever feel like their teammates are getting away. We now see some athletes dropping out based on how they're feeling, so it drops down to 2, it looks like.
So what's interesting is that I look at that as, you know, you look at these teams and who's leading and why. The thing is that as a team, it is much more difficult for the person to be in front because they're setting all the cadence, all the tone for everybody behind them. And so normally what you would want is that most advanced person to set that cadence. But if they don't know their teammates, they'll destroy their field and they'll string out and they'll create insecurities. And the last thing that you want on a team is insecurities. You're trying in event 1 to create this confidence. And so that's why watching Froning, it's interesting that here he is, he's really setting the tone for others to just sit behind, and they're turning off all of their thoughts and just stay with me. They don't have to think.
Just sorry to interrupt there, Chris. I think one thing that we should update the viewers is you can see there's 2 athletes now. They're completing this first lap. Just to clarify, there's 2 athletes that will drop out after the first lap. You can see Rich there and Scott. Away they go. They've kept the males out on the course. Interesting to see a couple of teams have sent a male and a female to finish this course. What do you think that is? That about individual strengths within the team, or is that conservation of energy for the other 2, resting them now? Is that how would you be looking at that?
So you have to take into consideration the balance of the events over the weekend, and one of the things that the events coming up, it's featuring really the strength or weaknesses of the women. Well, if you are having your women go out and do another 3,000 meters, it's going to diminish their ability to perform in those later events. And so part of it is that you have Scott Panchek, arguably one of the most dominant male athletes in the history of CrossFit, and Rich Froning, clearly, you know, the greatest of all time. Those guys are going to be able to hold up to the standards for the balance of the weekend. Not that Chase and China are any slackers. They are amazing athletes. But the thing is what's going to separate them from the other teams is the women. It is a smart tactical move on their part.
How will the extra 3K affect Rich and Scott in terms of sort of energy levels moving on? We've spoken about conservation of energy earlier on. They're obviously doing the extra work, and obviously you've just mentioned there that their body composition and their fitness allows them to do that. Yep. But it will still have an impact, surely, in terms of the latter part of the competition. Maybe it's today that it has the impact. How would you sort of view that?
So that's the thing about this event. It is an endurance event, but the unwritten endurance event is actually what follows after. So one of the major measures of aerobic fitness is how fast can you recover? It is truly based upon how much training that you do day to day. The beauty of a Scott Panchek and some of these other athletes that are here is that they're so aerobically fit because of the volume of work that they do, that they will actually recover at a faster rate as soon as the event is done. And, you know, we can look back at events, you know, throughout, you know, the CrossFit, you know, games and the years and things, and what they're really showing people is how fast are you recovering in between so that you're in a better position to dominate the next event.
Sorry again, Chris. In terms of your views on the team, and obviously Rich, Scott, the guys coming over here, they will be big favourites to take the win this weekend. Who would you see as being the biggest threat to CrossFit Mayhem Freedom?
You know, the thing is that this competition, there's a lot of talent that's here. And what makes these events so unique is that it's hard to tell who's going to do well. If one minor slip up from one teammate, you know what? You're going to drop 5, 6 places, and that could make the difference. I mean, there's no doubt that on paper, Mayhem looks good. But you know what? If the history of this sport has ever proven one thing, things happen. Yeah. Accidents happen. Mistakes happen. And so the thing is that if I'm a team that's going against Mayhem, I've got to make sure that I just don't make any mistakes. Because Mayhem, their chances of making one is slim to none.
I was going to say, with the preparation that you spoke about so eloquently earlier, it is preparation, and it's almost like they possibly are, Ben, the best prepared team coming into this competition.
I think they're probably the team that's been together the most. Okay, we have the new insert of Scott, but I think as a group, the fact that they train together so often, they know what each one can do, they know how each one feels, and I don't think there's any other teams in the field that will have been together as long as they have.
Right. I mean, that's the thing. There's no gifts. It takes hard work. And the thing is that that team works hard. I mean, and everybody knows that. I would be highly intimidated by going against the Mayhem team because they just historically have proven that they don't make mistakes.
It's really interesting to hear that. And actually, Lauren, in the middle of the workout here, she's actually got someone to have a chat to. Lauren, it's over to you.
I'm here with Helena from Team Wade, who are kind of the Irish contingent +1 in this event. Obviously, you've left the boys. They're still running around, but they were in the forefront. How did you tactically plan this one?
We said that the boys would take the sandbag for a duration. I would chip in with the sandbag. Emma's not feeling her greatest today. She's a bit unwell, so try to keep her off the sandbag. She's kept the pace. The boys felt comfortable. So actually try harder to try and let them kind of pull back a bit because we gained quite a few spaces ahead. So we kind of, hopefully they're fresh enough to finish this strong now. So yeah, we've got another K to go, I think. So fingers crossed they can finish it off with a win. Yeah.
As you were coming past, we noticed that Emma fell. We noticed that Emma fell back slightly. Are you able to tell us what's going on?
Yeah, so she's just had a bit of a sickness bug the last few days. So since Wednesday, she's been a bit unwell. She hasn't really had much food. So it was a little bit kind of, we had to make a plan to protect her. We didn't want to make her unwell. We didn't want to make her worse. So just keep a comfortable pace, but mentally strong. She's one of our best athletes, you know. So she, you know, mentally wise, she never wants to do anything half-hearted. So she gave her it all and finished really strong, bless her. So she's just recovering now. She's feeling okay, just a bit like weak and not really much energy going on. So really good effort from her, like massively. The team's so proud of her already. So just to get through this part.
And how are you feeling? It's the first time or at least I've seen you on a competitive field since the CrossFit Games?
Yeah, so since the CrossFit Games, this first one, I did the SID 12-man team, bit of fun as a box, and then this is the first high-end event that I've done since. So I'm feeling good. I've had a few injuries and niggles and still kind of like protecting a shoulder injury, but apart from that, feeling fit and well. So hopefully it's a nice competitive year for me coming up as well. So yeah, the run felt good, which is good. Good, nice fitness test to start. So yeah.
Well, we've tagged you as probably the main competitors to Rich Froning's CrossFit Mayhem. How does it feel to be chasing a team of kind of that experience?
Well, they're very experienced. All their athletes that I know they've got Scott in this year, haven't they? So it's a change for them, but he's an amazing athlete. It's quite nice to race and chase them and try, and hopefully the boys can keep up on the run because I think they were behind us on the run. So it's a good start.
Thanks, Alina. Thank you for speaking to us.
Lovely meeting you.
Thanks for that, Helena, and thanks, Lauren, for having that great chat with Helena. It was interesting to see, just as we're chatting to Helena, that actually her male teammates, Arminas and Michaela, are crossing the line to start their last push. Interesting to hear about Emma McQuaid being a little bit sick this week. Impact on that today. She struggled a little bit at the start of this comp, but she seems to have bounced back on the back of what Helena was saying then. That's testament to Emma's capability as an athlete.
Yeah, she's a phenomenal athlete, been to the games. She knows exactly what she's doing and what her capabilities are. I think, you know, she showed with such a strong finish in the Open. It's really cool to see Wade leading the field, and I think if we had to pick a team that may, you know, go a little bit toe-to-toe with Mayhem, it's going to be them. So I imagine they're thinking, let's get as many points on this run as we can, because as Chris said, the later workouts, Mayhem are going to go for them.
I mean, you look at their running form. So there's two things that I look at. Are they shuffling? Are their feet low to the ground? Or what they're doing is they're really exploding in the air. I mean, picture like shooting a cannonball. Do you shoot it flat or do you aim it up for maximum distance? And if you watch their running style, they're still running with power, which is incredible this deep in with the bag that they've got power. that's a threat.
Big threat. And
Yeah.
we saw just then, previously, there was a female athlete who's obviously gone round for the second loop, and it looked like she was really struggling there. So I think that load of the bag is really taking its toll on that athlete.
And we spoke about experience. Do you think that's inexperience having a part to play in how they've approached this, Chris?
It's just hard to say, because maybe that athlete, you know, with the events that are coming up, is the most confident to dominate those remaining events. And that's the thing, is like a team, it's all about tactics. And what you want to do is you want to look at the events and look at strengths and weaknesses. The disadvantage of new teams that they have is that they really don't know. And you can't be successful in the sport anymore and just show up by putting a super team together with people that have never worked together. It takes these synergies and knowledge. Like I was saying earlier, does your team know, based upon the rate of breathing of your teammates, of whether or not they're in control or out of control? And if you don't know that, you're not prepared.
Yeah, and we all know it's about being prepared, right?
Right.
You've got to put the work in order to perform well. It was a great transition there by the Wade boys, how they just switched the bag over. They've obviously practiced that.
I mean, when you see things like that, you've got to admire it, because that's not coming on accident. They've tried it and rehearsed it over and over and over, and so they could do it with their eyes closed. You know, it's funny, I always tell people, it's like, are you a recreational athlete or are you a competitive athlete? And people want to know, like, well, what makes you competitive? It's like, a competitive athlete can do all of these things that we're seeing on the monitor with their eyes closed. It's instinct. And a competitor is one where it's like, you know what? I could feel the clouds blocking the sun. All of these unknowns. I could run on an air runner with my eyes closed. That is a competitor. Those are the ones that are thinking tactically. They're running apex to apex. They're aware of the people coming from behind them. That's what a competitor is. Everybody else, it's just a game.
Speaking of competitor, yesterday I was fortunate to watch the rowing and the briefing, and the way Matt Fraser moves around, even when he's learning a new skill, he's just so focused. And I think you have to have that focus and take yourself seriously, don't you?
You really have to be a student of the game, and you want to be the one that wants to learn. So you get this one moment to get in that boat, and a lot of people were there of like nervously laughing and almost like games, and it's like you get one shot. And you watch the people that are going to do well. Lucas, Laura, you watch them do it, and it's like, you know what? This is not a game. This isn't a joke. I got to figure this out now.
Yeah, definitely.
I wanted to ask you, Chris, about the rowing regatta tomorrow. The first time ever that there's been a rowing, and actually, as we see the team Wade, the predominantly Irish team, they're Irish-based for the most part.
Look at their breath.
They look very comfortable.
That is, look at the breath. They're not hyperventilating. They're not leaning over. Heads are high. Look at this.
These guys could be serious competitors for the podium this weekend. I think we've discussed that. Looking very happy. Looks like he does not even touch 6K. Right. And he's done it with half of it, well, not a third of it, with a 20 kg weight on his back.
Who adjusts their socks after finishing a 6K? That does not happen unless, you know what? That was easy.
This is at least a 40-second lead over the second places. Obviously, we don't know where they were within the wave.
But still.
But I say that is a pretty impressive lead.
Right. I mean, the fact is that they dominated that event, and they did it with ease. You could tell it was relatively easy for them, because when they crossed the finish line, their body language was like, you know what?
And as you mentioned earlier, they had the awareness to just cruise over the line because they knew no one was close to them.
Right. And so what that team is telling you is that, you know what? We're here for the weekend.
Yeah.
Not one event.
All right, we've actually got that first team across as Team Wade, and Lauren's got the whole lot of them. Over to you, Lauren.
Yeah, I do have the whole lot of them. I'll start with Mikey.
Yeah.
How was that in terms of the transitions and how you decided to lay that work out? Did it execute to plan? Well, I assume it did. You pretty much won it.
I think we only missed one sandbag out of like 30, so yeah, happy enough. Yeah, we just kept rotating every minute or so, keep us fresh, you know. It wasn't too bad at all.
Emma, I mean, you're a little bit under the weather. Helena was just saying, how are you feeling now? Are you confident you can get through the rest of the workouts?
Oh, I think like if you can get through the first event, I think CrossFit's easier than like running outside. So yeah, hopefully I'll be fine.
It's a really interesting group, this, because we've got the Lithuanian national champion, we've got Ireland national champion, and 2 people who are yet to book their ticket to the games.
That's right.
Is there a bit of confidence, Helena, that you can do that this weekend?
Well, we always want confidence to do it. I think this is a great start. So it's just holding in top 3 places all weekend. Hopefully there's a good chance. Yeah. So.
Army, I'll send you the last question your way. You're up against one of the most well-known teams in the world in CrossFit Mayhem, yet you've just beaten them at the first event. What does that do to build confidence?
Yeah, obviously it's great. We kind of knew that we'll be fairly good at the running event. Their record at the games in running is not so great, so we kind of knew that if this was the workout we could make up a few points, that would be it. So we just did that, so very happy, and we'll see how the next 6 workouts go.
Well, guys, congratulations unofficially. That was the fastest time of the day. So we look forward to seeing what the rest of you've got. Thank you. Barry and Ben, back to you.
Awesome to see that from Team Wade there. They looked very happy, very comfortable in the aftermath of that. Emma McQuaid saying, CrossFit is actually easier than running outside, and so she'll be well set for the challenge for the rest of the weekend. It was quite astonishing to hear that.
I mean, that's incredible. I mean, it tells you the morale of that team, and it also tells you the level of confidence that they have in each other. That statement and the way that they behaved at the end is a team that is here to win.
Yeah, I think it is really great to hear that Emma's up for it and wants to get in the mix. So yeah, I'm really intrigued to see how they go. We have to say this is a specialist event, shall we? But I feel like they're going to be wanting to fight for every event coming up.
I mean,
sorry to interrupt. Just interested to see some of the sandbags there in terms of how there's a lot of tape, and obviously the teams have probably had some capacity to adapt those sandbags to. That's the way it looks in terms of some of the tape moved around there. Would they do that for even distribution of sand within those sandbags? Because it's interesting to see.
I think it's more the number. That was the number to identify them.
Or maybe there's a little benefit to it in some respect to redistribute the weight. But it's talking about fatigue factor and how comfortable Team Wade look crossing that line. We're seeing a lot of bodies bent over. They've struggled. They've really gassed themselves out potentially on that first event. Again, we've spoken about it in commentary earlier. That could have a major impact on the rest of their competition. Ben, thoughts on seeing that sort of fatigue factor kick in so early?
Yeah, it was a case of everyone sprinting at the end there to get those points, and you know, every place does matter because we've got a relatively small field, so the point difference from top to bottom is greater. You want to be moving up as far as you can, and I think Chris mentioned earlier, if we're using those fast twitch fibers early on in the competition, how are we going to feel later on? These teams have got a similar workout to the individuals. They've got Grace or Isabel, so clean and jerks and snatches, and then they've got to do 15 synchro muscle ups. If you're fatigued and having to do such a complex gymnastic movement, it's going to really, really show who has the capacity and who recovers.
I mean, that's the thing, is that they're going to go through that second event, and then they're going to try and recover this evening. And the fact is that if you have depleted all of your glycogen stores, you're going to start tomorrow in a diminished state. And I don't care who you are. The fact is that that is going to limit your performance. And if you were able to do this event in a controlled way, then, you know, as a team, you have a huge advantage going into day 2. You know, everybody always wonders how come Rich Froning was so great. You know, if you look at his performances time over time, he would win almost every event in the final day of the CrossFit Games. Why? Because he was so fit because of the volume of work that he did. What we just saw in that finish, that's a team that is fit. And they're going to come in day 2 and day 3 and being in a dominant position, maybe in a better position than anybody else.
Well, we're going to have to bring you back, Chris, for some more commentary over the weekend, because we'd love to have you back. It's been an absolute pleasure. I think it'd be interesting to hear your thoughts on the individual comps in terms of elite men, elite women. Who are your top 3 in both of those competitions as we look forward to our evening session here under the lights inside the arena?
I've got to say,
pressure's on.
I've got to say, Laura Horvath looks good. I really do. I think that Laura Horvath, she shined early on, you know, and it came in and did well in the games 2 years ago. She has refound her fitness, and I think that she's here to demonstrate that she's in for the long term. I think she's a dangerous competitor. Matt Fraser, let's face it, he works harder than anybody else in the sport, and he is always wanting to establish his dominance and maintain it. He wants to be a person of intimidation. Those two people, that's
amazing.
where I put my money.
Well, we will see if if those predictions come true. Lauren's actually down with another team. Lauren, who are you chatting to?
I'm here with Vondel Gym Motion. Probably the most interesting team here this weekend, purely for the fact that it's a hybrid of 2 fairly different gyms. So Harrison, tell us about how you guys all met and started training together.
So we are 2 couples. So Grace and I are a couple, Jeremy and Ninka are a couple, and we met at a competition, Swiss Alpine Battle, a couple years ago. So we've just kept in contact since, and yeah, it's pretty cool to be able to compete together. So we knew something would work out well if we could link up at some point, and luckily enough, they accepted it.
Yeah. Well, it definitely worked out well. You were the team that was following in Team Wade across the finish line.
Yeah, they were fast. They were really fast. Yeah. On the first bit, I thought we might be able to like settle in and catch up with them, and then they just kept getting further away.
Yeah.
So how did training go for this? Because you can't obviously cross over all that much as 2 couples.
No, well, yeah, go on, you go.
There we go. Yeah, we came over in December. Yeah. They came over in January to Amsterdam, and then we went back this week. So we had like 3 decent weeks of training, and now we are just doing this comp.
And also, I think it helps that we train together every day. They train together every day. We've been on team before. They've been on team before. So, like, it was just kind of putting the 2 pieces together. Yes. If that makes sense.
Instead of 4.
Yeah, instead of 4 pieces together.
Yeah. Well, it definitely seemed to work today. In terms of the rest of the competition, what workouts are you earmarking?
There's none. Well, anything with a worm would be great, because that's what both of us, we use that quite a lot as pairs with our team workouts. So the more worm, the better, really, for us. Yeah, more teamy, the better. Not so good as the individuals by ourselves, apart from Nink. But the rest of us, yeah, is more teamy, the better, the workouts. So, yeah.
I have just had in my ear that it was an official time of 27:11 and you have come second.
Woo! Oh, very exciting.
Oh, brilliant. Yeah, come on, I haven't spoken to you yet, so initial reaction.
Yeah, very happy with it. No, we really practiced running with the bag before, so we knew what to expect, and it felt about the same. We did like a 6K run practice, and we just did what we practiced.
And you beat CrossFit Mayhem.
Yeah.
We can check that off our bucket list.
If it's going to happen, it's going to be a run event, let's face it.
But what does this do in terms of confidence? Because you've got an entire weekend to go and you've beaten one of the biggest teams in this competition.
Yeah, I mean, there's many more to come. So, I mean, we just like, I mean, most of us like running except Grace, but so we just need to keep the point, like get the points that we need at the run. So, I mean, you don't want to leave anything out there. So I hope we, I think second, like, we're definitely happy with that. Yeah.
Well, congratulations, everybody. It was lovely to be able to deliver the news in person. Good luck the rest of the weekend.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lauren, and congrats to the guys from Vondel Gym there, or the hybrid Vondel Gym Motion. You can see up on the screen there, actually phenomenal response from a lot of teams in there, and a little bit of surprise for CrossFit Mayhem coming in ninth. But Team Wade, as we've been discussing, seems to be the team to beat early on.
Look at those finishing times. I mean, they carried that bag and came in 25:41. It's incredible what these athletes are capable of doing.
Ben, thoughts from you as well on that effort and hearing how, well, looking at the smiles on the faces of the Bundle Gym team there. They look absolutely either flabbergasted or delighted, or a mixture of the two.
I think they're absolutely ecstatic. I often train at Motion. It's close to my house. And Harrison and Grace don't proclaim to be the best runners, so I think perhaps they are a little bit surprised at where they came there, but very well done to them. Yes, you mentioned Mayhem were down a little bit, but I don't think they're going to be phased. They're probably aware that it's not their strongest suit, and there's loads of events for the rest of the weekend where they're going to make up.
And that's the key, is that Mayhem, if you look at that performance, 9th place. The truth is that if they actually had a more conservative approach, they didn't hurt themselves. There's 6 more events. There's a lot of competition here. But the fact is that 9th place, they lost a lot of points today. I mean, part of what we all want is an exciting competition, and that is certainly going to create some excitement.
We definitely have some excitement. That actually brings us to the end of workout 1. It's been a terrific first start. We're Friday. We've never had the Friday start for CrossFit Strength in Depth. Great way to start the weekend. We're going to take a break. We're going to be back at 16:05 for event number 2. Chris Henshaw, thank you once again for being part of this. Ben, thanks for your time again this morning. We'll see you later on this afternoon.
Say it again, man, and that's a reverse. Never